So, orcs are awesome, and in all my time wargaming, I've never actually painted an army of them. So, when someone asked if I could paint them as Orcs Legion, I jumped on the opportunity. As Orcs Legion has some nice models, but they come with a completely insane price tag. So rather than using the official models, we decided to go with the Obsidian Orcs, a great alternative which are available on the Conquest Creation web store. Pretty much, they're just absolutely badass orcs. Time to get started on the most exciting part of the hobby, cleaning models. Some of the orcs needed to be holding banners, so I carefully cut off the spear from the warrior's hand and I drilled through it so that a rod could be inserted. This way, the banner will be infinitely more durable. It's important to take durability into account when you're making an army that's for tabletop wargaming. I glued all of the models onto temporary bases to hold them while I paint them. Later on, they'll be cut off these bases and put onto some nice resin cast bases. My horde of orcs got primed and taken inside for a lick of paint. I talked a lot with my client about what he was looking for in the color scheme of the army. These were his models after all, and I wanted him to get exactly what he was after. He said that he wanted them to be dark and gritty. And the main role of this army is to be used in tournaments, so they need to look good while they're on the table. I painted up this model to get some feedback. Overall, it looked good, but he decided on going darker with the skin tone so that we could have some awesome red war paint. That sounded absolutely sick. With the paint scheme figured out, I pushed through all of my Orc Legionnaires. After using this pot of lead belcher for years and using it on well over 100 miniatures, it's finally empty and I feel a strange sense of pride in scraping out the final remnants of this pot. The metal was the biggest section of the model, which is why I started with it. I went in next and did the skin, and started getting some of the smaller details like the hair, as well as doing things like straps. And finally, the captain got a nice red cape to help him stand out from all of his comrades. That's all the base coating done, so it's washing time. Washing takes a model from looking ungodly awful to having some serious potential. I did a layer of everyone's favourite Nuln Oil, and after that dried a second layer of everyone's other favourite Agrax Earthshade. This makes the models all come together looking a lot nicer. After leaving them for ages to dry, I started on the long but significantly more exciting road of highlighting. Because this army is going to be on the table, it is important that it stands out from a distance. So I did edge highlights with a bright silver that pops out a lot because it has a lot of contrast with the dark metal. After that, each colour section got addressed with a few layers of highlights. I would start with the original colour and then I would mix in a bit of cream to lighten it. That almost finishes off the painting on the majority of the orcs, so I put them aside and started working on the next part. My client wanted to have some goblin mercenaries in his army. In As Orcs Legion, goblin mercenaries are capable of travelling ahead of the army and waiting in terrain to ambush their enemies when the time is right. These guys are really powerful in-game and were an important part of the project. Unfortunately, the official models, once again, are very expensive, and we didn't need as many as came in one box. Rather than raising the project's budget, I suggested that doing some conversions would be cooler and cheaper. And this went down really well, so I got started. The Goblin Mercenaries have a few key design features. They are basically the regular cheap goblin towns, but with cool segmented armor. And a few spare goblins laying around, as well as a few spare Morannon orcs, the other orcs from Lord of the Rings. The idea is that if I can combine these models, I will have some epic armored goblins. After just holding the models up next to each other, I was ready to get cutting. The first goblin I ended up with was this awesome guy with a large sword, an armored arm, and a helmet. It really sells the look that this guy's scavenged his armor. I also love his pose. It's really cool, as if he's challenging someone to a fight. Unsurprisingly, after doing this across a few models, there were a lot of gaps. So I mixed up some green stuff, and with a bit of flexible modeling paste, I smoothed out all of the joins. Flexible modeling paste is my favorite tool for smoothing out joins. It's so much easier than green stuff, and you can just paint it on with a brush. With all the gaps addressed, these guys were done and ready for some paint. They got a similar paint job to the Orcs, but they had light pale skin from spending their whole entire lives in caves. The army also needed some ogres and some bats, so I custom printed off a few cool miniatures that I found online and I gave them some paint to match with the rest of the army. With almost all the models done, it was time to make some bases. I'm using my own custom resin cast bases for this army. I thought I would take you through the process of making resin bases. First, make a cool looking base. Easy enough, right? I sculpted this one using some clay on a 50mm base. Surround the base with Lego or any other material to be a wall that will contain our silicon. I used a bunch of things before like Perspex sheets, but I always come back to Lego just because it's the easiest. And then just mix up some silicon and pour that baby in. I pour it in from a great height and do it slowly so there aren't any air bubbles. And after it cures, I just pop it out and it looks good. Now we need some resin to go in it. I use a simple 2-part polyurethane resin and I mix up equal parts of part A and B and pour away. I had a little more than I needed, so I grabbed an extra mold and poured the leftovers in it so it wasn't wasted. Then I leveled everything off the top with a spatula. This stuff only takes about 15 minutes to dry, so I went away and worked on other models. After that was done, I came back and popped them out. And that's how I produce resin cast bases that are available from my web store. If you could check it out, that would be awesome. I primed the bases black and I gave them a dry brush of grey. Following that, I gave them another dry brush of a much lighter grey. The final thing is some grass tufts. If you have a static grass applicator, just buy regular static grass and you can make your own tufts. If you don't have one, then you can pick up tufts from a heap of places. My recommendation would be Zorbazorb. I clipped the applicator to a metal sheet and I spread the grass over a whole bunch of drops of PVA glue, and it's as simple as that. All the Orcs can be removed from their temporary bases and glued onto their new bases. Then I add tufts after the model is on. The Orcs had one more detail that I wanted to do as the final step to finish the model, and that is their red war paint. I had a blast adding this all over the models' helmets, focusing around their faces. The last model to do was the army's general and all-round badass CGI orc, my boy Azog. I had the joy of cleaning and preparing a fine cast model, and after painting him, he got the same base as the rest of the army. With every project I do, I want to add something a little bit extra that takes the project to the next level and gets the client something even better than what they were expecting. For this project, I decided to add in 3 extra models. 3 Berserkers. I think they're really cool units in-game, and my client's army list didn't have any of them. So I decided to add some in that he can use just in case he wants to change his list up a bit. If you're interested in having an army commission painted, well, get in contact with me and you'll get something a little bit extra as well. With the army finished, it's really important that this army gets to where it's going in one piece, so every single model got individually wrapped. I also included a little note just saying thank you for taking me on for this project. And with that,
I was ready to ship this bad boy off.
I've got a few more videos like this on the way, and thanks for watching it, and don't forget to check out the Conquest Creation website for these orc models, these awesome resin bases, and for your commission painting. Thanks for watching, and until next time, have a good one.